Meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 15 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. Today we will be hearing from the President of the Treasury Board and officials regarding the main estimates 2022-2023 and the departmental plans. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members that are attending in person in the room as well as remotely using the Zoom application. Regarding the speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do the best we can to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether participating virtually or in person. I'd like to take this opportunity also to remind all the participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. Given the ongoing pandemic situation and in light of the recommendations from public health authorities, as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19, 2021, to remain healthy and safe, the following is recommended for all those attending the meeting in person. Anyone with symptoms should participate by Zoom and not attend the meeting in person. Everyone must maintain 2-meter physical distancing, whether seated or standing. Everyone must wear a non-medical mask when circulating in the room. It is recommended in the strongest possible terms that members wear their masks at all times, including when seated. Non-medical masks, which provide better clarity over cloth masks, are available in the room. Everyone present must maintain proper hand hygiene by using the hand sanitizer at the room entrance. Committee rooms are cleaned before and after each meeting, so to maintain this, everyone is encouraged to clean the surfaces such as their desks, their chair, their microphones, with the provided disinfectant wipes when vacating or taking a seat. As the chair, I will be enforcing these measures for the duration of the meeting, and I thank members in advance for their cooperation. I'd like to welcome the President of the Treasury Board, Minister Fortier, for her being here and her colleagues, and I invite her to make her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for having me again. This time to discuss the main estimates for fiscal year 2022-2023 and the departmental plan for the Treasury Board Secretariat for the same period. Et je suis accompagnée aujourd'hui.
I'm accompanied today in a hybrid mode by various public servants from the Treasury Board Secretariat. So on my left, Annie Boudreau, Assistant Secretary, Expenditure Management Sector, Karen Cahill, Assistant Secretary and Chief Financial Officer, Marie-Chantal Girard on my right, Acting Chief Human Resources Officer. Online, Monia Lahaye, Assistant Controller, Financial Management Sector, Samantha Tattersall, Assistant Controller General, Acquired Services and Assets Sector, and Paul Wagner, Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategy and Transformation. I'd like to tell you that these public servants work extremely hard, and I want to thank them for that.
Main estimates seek funding to address Canada's key priorities. This includes infrastructure investments, benefits for seniors and for students, transfers to provinces and territories for healthcare and childcare, and action to reduce emissions and green our economy. The government is also seeking the necessary investments to continue protecting and supporting Canadians through the COVID-19 pandemic and foster economic recovery. The
main estimates present information on anticipated budget expenditures totaling $397.6 billion that will allow 126 organizations to provide programs and services to the Canadian population. This can be distributed into voted expenditures of $190.3 billion and statutory expenditures of $207.3 billion already authorized under existing laws.
Details about each organization's work can be found in the departmental plans. The plans were tabled the day after the main estimates supporting parliamentary scrutiny. The Treasury Board of Canada Secretary is seeking $7.8 billion in funding in these main estimates. $4.3 billion is broken down as follows. $750 million for government contingencies, $152 million for government-wide initiatives, $2.1 billion for operating and $750 million for capital budget carry forward, and $600 million for pay list expenditures. These central votes support Treasury Board in its role as the expenditure manager, employer, and general manager of the Government of Canada. Il y a également un montant.
There's also $3.2 billion that will allow us to make payments for pension systems, benefits and insurance, employer contributions to health insurance, salary insurance, and life insurance. The remaining $320 million is for the operations and activities of the department.
Touch briefly on some of my department's objectives and priorities. In its spending oversight, TBS is beginning an ongoing strategic policy review to ensure programs are effective on challenges like climate change, the pandemic, and growing the economy. It will also adapt government to our post-pandemic reality, such as digitization. And I want to be clear, the review is about smarter government, not smaller government. TBS will also work with Environment and Climate Change Canada to ensure that climate considerations are integrated throughout the government's decision-making. And in its role as employer, TBS will continue to ensure that Canadians can receive services in both official languages. We'll work to bolster our role through the C-13, an Act for the Substantive Equality of Canada's Official Languages, which will strengthen our monitoring, auditing, and evaluation. And we'll also begin a review of how to best protect the courageous whistleblowers who disclose serious wrongdoing within government. Pour ce qui est de son
With regards to its role, assuming an administrative role within the government, TBS will continue to improve the digital experience of Canadians when they use government services. It will work with government partners in order to help departments and agencies to satisfy the requirement that at least 5% of the value of federal contracts are given to Indigenous businesses. It will cooperate with departments and agencies to respect the government's commitment to buy completely clean electricity wherever possible by the end of 2022, electrifying the light vehicle fleet of the federal government by 2030, and reduce the production of trash and the use of water.
TBS will bring forward a plan for the future of work in the public service. It will also support departments in removing barriers for public servants with disabilities and in implementing plans outlined in their responses to the call to action on anti-racism, equity, and inclusion in the public service. Finally, in its regulatory oversight role, TBS will continue to lead efforts to ensure regulations maintain high health and safety standards while improving the competitiveness of Canadian businesses. A key measure is Bill 6, S6, the second annual regulatory modernization bill. This legislation will reduce administrative burden for businesses, facilitate digital interactions with government, and simplify regulatory processes. S6 will support our economic recovery by helping businesses do what they do best and making it easier for Canadians to get things done. Mr. Chair, these priorities set out in the Treasury Board Secretariat's departmental plan and the investments requested in the main estimates reflect our effort to meet the evolving needs of Canadians.
Thanks to these documents, the government continues to present information in an open, transparent, and responsible way so that parliamentarians and Canadians have a clear idea of how the government intends to invest on behalf of Canadians and Canada.
Thank the committee for your work and the valuable role you play in the estimates and parliamentary supply process. In closing, thank you again for the invitation for having me, and my officials and I would be pleased to answer your questions at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for your presentation, and thank you to the witnesses that you brought with you, and it's greatly appreciated to see you here again in person, so thank you very much. We'll now go into first round of questioning, and we'll start with Mr. McCauley for 6 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, Minister, and colleagues, welcome back. I want to start about whistleblowers. 2017, this committee put in a unanimous report, widely lauded by the Canadian whistleblower community, unanimously lauded by the whistleblower community. It's been 5 years. We've seen nothing. When will we actually see the recommendations from this committee brought into legislation?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. McCauley. And our government believes that those who disclose serious wrongdoing must be protected. And the law provides a secure and confidential process for...
See legislation to protect whistleblowers.
And I understand. I would like to set the stage by the fact that the government is working very hard, and Budget 2022 funded a review of the Act, which we will expect beginning very soon, later this year. Also, I just want to thank the work that you've done as you tabled a report with 15 recommendations.
I
and I would like to hear on what you think we should be looking forward to as we will be reviewing this
a couple
later
things,
this
Minister.
year.
You know, you mentioned the law. Canada has the weakest whistleblower laws in the OECD. For 5 years, the government sat on its hands and has done nothing. Recently, there was a situation where whistleblowers were actually exposed, and this sums up the Canadian whistleblower experience. 2 whistleblowers for the CRA were actually outed by the Public Service Integrity Commissioner, the very gentleman who's supposed to protect whistleblowers, outed whistleblowers. So what is going to be done about that? Why has it been 5 years with no legislation? You asked me what my recommendations are. This committee put through very specific items to put in. The government could bring it in a week. Why has this not been done? Why is the very person charged with protecting whistleblowers exposing whistleblowers? What is the government going to do to protect those specific whistleblowers?
Well, thank you again. And to start with the first mention about the CRA whistleblowers at the federal court, so we know that the Office of the Public Sector Integrity Commissioner of Canada is an independent agent of Parliament, and it's mandated to allow anyone to disclose wrongdoing in the federal public sector confidentially and safely. And I have been advised that this information has been removed by the federal...
That person exposed whistleblowers. The very person meant to protect whistleblowers, expose them. They have no protection for 5 years. Now, I appreciate you want to do a review. The review is going to spend $2 million, $3 million over 5 years, which will mean a 10-year gap between this committee's widely lauded recommendations and perhaps a chance to even start looking at legislation. Why don't we just simply put in the legislation recommended by unanimously, and it was at this time, it was a Liberal majority committee.
Well, thank you again for that information. As you know, I've been mandated to review the Whistleblower Act, and we will be reviewing this later this year. As you saw in Budget 2022, we have put some money to do this exercise. Maybe Marie-Chantal wants to add on where we are at this point. No offense,
I don't want to hear from Ms. Sherrod because she does not have the ability to put forward the legislation. Do you believe it's acceptable for a 10-year gap between this committee's recommendation and a start to even look at legislation? That'll be 2 governments from now, 2 parliaments from now. People are exposed.
And again, I know that the committee did hard work in 2017, recommended 15 recommendations. We will take that into account and also start the work. As I just mentioned, we're investing in Budget 2022 and an important investment to raise this and review the Act.
I will just state for the record, and I appreciate your good intentions, but we know the path to certain areas led with good intention, paved with good intentions. I don't believe it's good enough for our whistleblowers. I hope you will reconsider. Those people outed by our own government, those whistleblowers, will you commit to them publicly that they will be protected from retribution from the CRA and from the government for exposing corruption and wrongdoing within the CRA?
And again, I would like
brave whistleblowers, as you mentioned, deserve our protection, will you guarantee them that they will be protected from retribution?
Well, it is our government's intention, and we believe that those who disclose serious wrongdoing
people's
must
lives
be
are on the line.
protected,
Will they
and we
be
will
protected?
continue to, as I said earlier, we are going to be reviewing later this year, and we are investing into this review.
Minister, these are whistleblowers. Will they be protected? Our government, the government of Canada, outed them. Will they be protected? They deserve that.
Well, we're continuing to make sure that those who disclose serious wrongdoings must be protected. So that is an objective. And also our government has strengthened training, monitoring, reporting, and policies in the workplace to make sure that this is taken into consideration. And I know that the officials might want to go in more details, maybe in the next hour. I know you have other questions.
I don't believe that's good enough. I don't believe the action taken in the 5 years is anywhere adequate. We are still, when you talk to the whistleblower community, we're still the weakest in the OECD. Corrupt dictatorships have stronger whistleblower protection than Canada. I think we need to do better.
Well, this is a government's priority. It's in my mandate
I'm out
letter,
of
and we
time.
will continue to work on this closely.
Thank you, Mr.
for
McCauley.
raising
And we'll now go to Mr. Housefather for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Minister Fortier, for being here. I want to say that I have had the opportunity to read the report on whistleblowers that Mr. McCauley referred to, which recommends strengthening protections for whistleblowers and expanding the definition of the people that would be protected by the Act to include people who inadvertently were suspected of being the whistleblower when they were not, for example. And I definitely support our including in the budget this review of the Act. I was wondering, since we didn't quite get to that, could you give us a wider explanation of, for budget 2022, the amounts that are given for this review and what is planned? And Minister, I'll let you refer it to whoever you'd like.
Yes, again, I will ask Marie-Chantal to move forward, but I think, again, it's important to state that our government really believes that we need to move forward with the review, and she will give the details. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. Indeed, there are two streams of work that are being done concurrently on this issue. So we are not waiting. We are improving in the Office of the Chief Human Resource Officer the whistleblower protection. In addition to the training and the awareness that was mentioned by the President, we're also meeting with the managers' communities. All senior leaders are also being trained and informed. We are implementing through the policy suite reset an initiative to focus on greater protection and improving the reprisal protection and supports to public servants. And to that specific aspect, we fully recognize that it's a very stressful thing. It's a very stressful approach and discussion to have and action to pose. So through our Center of Expertise on Mental Health, we are developing also services that are targeted to supporting a potential whistleblower and accompany them in that difficult period. For the review, $2.4 million were identified in the budget, and we will start as the end of the summer, early fall, the work for the consultation, preparing review options, criteria, doing the research, and meeting with stakeholders for the Act, the review of the Act.
Thank you so much. In terms of the other point that was raised, my understanding, and forgive me if I'm incorrect, is that the existing Act, no matter how much it would need to be strengthened, would obviously continue to protect those who are whistleblowers who might have been inadvertently disclosed in the federal court. Would that be correct?
You are correct.
And finally, my understanding is as well that the documents have now been withdrawn from the court because they were inadvertently disclosed by attorneys in a huge batch of production that had been agreed to by the parties, and eventually these were judged to be irrelevant to the case. Is that also correct?
I'm afraid I cannot confirm.
Okay.
I don't have the confirmation, but we can come back to you,
Thank you.
with the answer.
Mr. Chair, do I have a minute left? 2.5. Oh, 2.5, fantastic. Madame la Présidente du Conseil de Trésor.
Madam President of Treasury Board, as you know, we share a passion for official languages, Could you talk to us about the way C13 will increase your powers within Treasury Board to ensure the quality of French and English in the federal public service and to advance the cause of both official languages? Yes, thank you very much for that question. Yes, that's a cause dear to both our hearts, but also the hearts of Canadians and many members of our communities who have contributed for many years now to modernize the Official Languages Act and see how we can ensure that all the money spent, all the policies are implemented, and have a better way to look at them closely and make sure they respond to the situations we see in this country. So the role of Treasury Board will be increased, and that will allow us to play a compliance role, play a better role to evaluate programs and measures that are put forward. So I'm very eager to see all parties support the adoption of the bill on the modernization of official languages, C13, so that after 50 years we can strengthen this legislation.
That we don't think that the passion for official languages only comes from the Francophone minority in Canada. I want to now ask in English. This will give you, as I understand it, the power to go to certain federal agencies and departments that don't respect official language policies as well as others and push them to be better in what they do. Is that correct? That you're sort of now an overseeing mechanism across the government?
Well, exactly. We'll need to not only monitor, but also audit and evaluate how these programs and measures are brought forward by the federal government and how they are working, and working with the different departments to make sure that these are responding to the needs that we have in the 21st century.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I think that's probably my time, Mr. Chair.
Seconds.
I just want to thank you again, and I look forward to working with you on the official language side. I'll yield back 20 seconds.
For the loving part.
Thank you, Mr. House Father. Okay, we will go, and I'll add the extra 5 seconds to Mrs. Vignola, and Mrs. Vignola, 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, a brief answer, if you will, Ms. Fortier. Thank you very much for being here, by the way. For the Parliamentary Budget Officer, there was an increase of $1.174 million, roughly, compared to 2020. My simple question is does that really reflect the needs of the Parliamentary Budget Officer? Or could we better represent his needs? Well, we do appreciate the work that the Parliamentary Budget Officer does. I will allow Annie to reply to that specific question, but I think it's important to say that that allows us to look closely at what we do. There may be a more specific answer that we could provide you with. Thank you for the question. The main estimates are based on the number of people needed. So the increase you see in the main estimates is reflective of the number of full-time equivalents. When it comes to the National Capital Commission, I saw that for vote 1 there was a reduction of about $7 million compared to 2020-21, and for vote 5 there was an increase of about $8 million. The amounts due, well, first of all, I'd like to know if this is just a transfer for one vote to another, and secondly, the NCC was asked to reimburse evaluation amounts to the City of Chelsea. Will this money be paid to it, and if so, when? And third question related to that, how many other municipalities see their evaluation role contested by the NCC? Well, first of all, thank you for your question. I know that the NCC works very hard in this region to respond to various requests and cooperate with the federal government. Of course, I will allow Annie to answer the first, second, and third question in detail, but I can tell you that there was a situation in Chelsea, in the past year. There was an update, and I think that that amount should be paid soon. But if we don't have the answer, I'll get back to you with a more detailed answer, because I know that this is an issue going on in that municipality. Thank you. For municipalities, we don't have the information in the main estimates 2022-23, but with regard to transfers, this is not a transfer. No, transfers are normally done in supplementary estimates. However, this can vary from year to year. Thank you. So I can expect, or we can expect, that the taxpayers of Chelsea can expect that this situation will be resolved within a couple of months. Well, once again, I'll get back to you with a more specific answer, because I think that there are certain events and activities going on between Chelsea and the NCC in the past year, and we'll be able to answer you more clearly after I check this. I don't have the information at hand right now. Thank you very much. I saw that under vote 5 at Treasury Board Secretariat, there was $0 for adjustments to payroll. I wondered about that. I wondered, is Phoenix suddenly working and we didn't find out? Why is there no adjustment provided for? I'm trying to understand that $0 amount. Yes, we will answer you more specifically. Annie will share that with you. You said vote 5, but I think you mean vote 15. Is that possible? Yes, that's possible. I probably wrote it down wrong. Adjustments to payroll. Yes, that is vote 15. That's related to increases under collective agreements. So when there is a new collective agreement signed, you will see an increase, and they're reflected once again in the supplementary estimates. Okay, so you don't have any ongoing negotiations. Well, right now, there are negotiations going on with various bargaining agents and the government, but it's not necessarily applied right now, because we have to continue these negotiations with an agreement within the next 12 to 18 months. Now, with regard to the Public Service Commission, I see there's a decrease of 1.5 million. It's not a lot, but it is a reduction. And for the Public School of the Public Service, there is a reduction of $7.1 million. If memory serves me, and I might be wrong, seems to me more people have been hired. So I'm trying to understand how we hired more people, but the costs of the School of the Public Service are being reduced. These people have to be trained, and usually training is pretty long for employment insurance and things like that. Well, thank you for doing your homework, because you have excellent questions. It's quite clear. We know that the School of the Public Service worked extremely hard in the past 2 years under COVID in order to adjust. So what I could do right now, unless we have a more specific answer at hand, is to get back to you with an explanation of the reduction you see in the report.
If you could provide us that answer in writing, that would be appreciated. Thank you. I will now go to Mr. Johns for 6 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister, for being here today. Minister, today the Commissioner on of the Environment and Sustainable Development tabled an important report regarding whether the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat led the greening government strategy in a way that supports the government's climate goals. Commissioner found that 5 years into the strategy, the Secretariat's efforts were not as complete as they could be, citing a limited approach to risk management and missing information. Because of this, it's not clear whether the government is on track to meet its 2050 net zero target. How do you plan to accelerate efforts to green government operations and increase transparency to Canadians?
Well, first I have to say that the Commissioner of Environment, I had a conversation with him last week, knowing the report was coming out, and I have to say that of the 5 recommendations that were tabled, we agree with 4 of them, and we will be working with those 4 recommendations, as this is in the beginning of our greening government strategy. We have time to develop and address different ways of making sure we we concentrate on the priorities we have identified. And
About what you're going to do to accelerate. I know Crown corporations have been left out, and they're a huge greenhouse gas contributor when it comes to buildings.
so our goals in the greening strategy is to modernize fleets with zero emission, hybrid, and climate change alternate fuel vehicles. We also have building zero carbon buildings and maximizing energy efficiency in existing ones. The third goal is to using nature-based solutions to protect assets from threats like flooding, and transitioning to a net zero circular economy through green procurement. So we will be adjusting and working with these goals to make sure that we get to the net zero by 2050.
We're hoping that you'll expand as well into ensuring that all Crown corporations as well are included. In terms of the strategic review of the public service, which obviously the big issue right now in concern, as you can imagine, especially from public service workers. The announcement that was made around the review and potential cuts up to $6 billion has understandably prompted concern from many of the hardworking public servants and Canadians who rely on public services. The last time a strategic review happened, the Harper government cut service delivery for veterans, people on EI, and many others. In fact, we're seeing the backlog right now still that your government has failed to fix from the Conservatives for veterans that have been injured because of those cuts, and obviously Phoenix Pay as well. And 19,000 public service jobs were lost as a result of that. So the lack of details, as you can imagine, about this review are deeply concerning. Can you reassure Canadians that this review will not impact service levels and that the public service unions will be consulted throughout this whole process?
Well, thank you for bringing this, and I'm actually really glad that we are moving forward with this strategic policy review. We promised it to Canadians, and we are keeping that promise. As we know, this review will ensure that our programs are effective on challenges like climate change, the pandemic, growing our economy, and it will also keep us enabled to adapt our government from post-pandemic realities such as digitization. Now,
the question,
this is
I just want to know, is it
I'm getting
okay,
there.
great, thanks,
So
Minister.
we want to be a smarter government, not a smaller government. And for that, it's really important to say that even our government have been increasing the public servants into our government in the last 7 years. We are going to continue to work with public servants, and I did share in the last 2 weeks following the announcement in the budget that we want to bring higher value to taxpayer dollars, and that is focusing on priorities, how we can do better. How can we transform those buildings that are empty into maybe community living? How can we get those investments that we're doing right now into better and smarter ways of delivering services to Canadians? And
I
that's the
appreciate
review
Minister.
that I'll be
My
taking
concern is
into.
around service levels, and I think that was the question, and ensuring that Canadians, that this review is not going to impact Canadian service levels. We saw what happened with Veterans Affairs. We saw what happened, with Phoenix and the expensive outsourcing that's taking place around Phoenix with consultants to fix expensive consultants, broken delivery. In terms of whistleblower protection, I'm going to follow Mr. McCauley. This government is committed to take action to improve whistleblower protections and supports for public servants, which is critical. And Budget 2022 now proposes to provide, $2.4 million over 5 years to the Treasury Board Secretary to launch a review of the Public Service Servants Disclosure Protection Act. This committee did a review of this issue a few years back and made some really good recommendations, which Mr. McCauley sat on. Why will it take 5 years to conduct this work?
So again, I think I've been clear that we are starting the review later this year. So we're acting on making sure that we are going to do this review. And we have $2.4 million to, of course, start that exercise. And I have to come back to the fact that the report that was tabled in 2017, the 15 recommendations, I believe you and probably also Mr. McCauley would raise these recommendations recommendations as still being important into the review that we'll be undertaking. So I will take into account this 2017 report to do the work that we're doing and hopefully continue conversations with all you and parliamentarians to do this.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. We've now finished our first round, and we'll now go into our second round. And we'll start with Mr. Paul Hoos for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, Minister, ladies. Easy question. It's in the news. We have the Parliamentary Budget Officer who found a $15 billion mistake in the budget. I'd like you to explain how that can happen. We're not talking about 15 million, we're talking about $15 billion. It was in the Globe and Mail. I'm ready for that answer. I just have to get organized in my own head. Just a moment. Well, I understand that in the main estimates, we're investing a certain amount of money for defense, and we demonstrate that the difference is attributable. I have this in English.
To recently announced policy measures, including those in Budget 2022, as well as funding that was previously approved capital projects that still require Treasury Board approval and inclusion in the estimates. Now, for specific details or projects, I would also invite you to speak with my colleague, the Minister of National Defense, but that $15 billion will have to go through the submission to the Treasury Board.
So if I've understood correctly, these were pre-approved amounts or should have to be approved. They're not approved yet, but they're in the budget. Well, right now the main estimates identified a certain amount which has been requested, but 77 billion over 2 years. But in the budget, in a near future, we'll have others. Yes, but this year's budget, it identifies 77 billion, but we thought, well, maybe there was 8 billion provided for increases in expenditures, and there's all this money not accounted for. It's within the there's a problem here. The Minister of Finance had these figures. Well, where does the authorization go through? Well, it has to go through me, Treasury Board, but there's the main estimates and Budget 2022, and when we can receive the request from the Department of National Defense to explain that 15 billion and authorize the expenditure, we can present it in a supplementary budget, A, B, or C, depending on when the Minister of National Defense makes the request. I'm going to continue because time passes quickly, as you know. The central bank increased the interest rates. We're expecting another one. What impact will that have on servicing the debt? That's a good question. Could you repeat it, please? The Bank of Canada rate increased by 0.5 point. It's going to increase by another 0.5 point. So what is the direct impact on the public finances of Canada? What will be your leeway to authorize expenditures? Well, thank you for that. Well, didn't you already get information about that? No, we don't have the information, and the same question is true for the Department of Finance. As you know, Finance makes 2 economic updates about servicing the debt. They'll do it again this fall in the economic review. Earlier you talked about federal buildings. BGIS, that has the management contract for all infrastructure in Canada. Was their contract renewed? We're talking about several $1 billion. Well, thank you for your question. I think that the Minister Tassé, who's responsible for this, is coming to see you on Friday. She's probably in a better position to answer that question. Well, at Treasury Board, didn't you get a request for renewing the contract? with BGIS? No? Okay. I have 15 seconds left. With regard to national defense, once again, the department returned $1.2 billion out of its $28 billion envelope because of delays in supplies. Is that the information you got on your end? I don't have that information. Could you tell us which fiscal year? Last year, 2021 budget. And Defense did not spend $1.2 billion and returned it to the Department of Finance, or Treasury Board rather. It happens a lot. There are delays in construction, be it at Defense or other departments. When these delays occur, the money is pushed back to the following year. There's 20% that the departments are allowed to push back for capital expenditures. It's possible that amount is part of that.
If you feel you need to add more to that, if you would submit that information in writing to the clerk, and the clerk will distribute that amongst the committee. Thank you very much. We'll
Yes.
now go to Mrs. Thompson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, welcome, and your staff, welcome to the committee. If you, Minister, wouldn't mind speaking briefly around funding for Indigenous Services Canada and the CIR-NAC. Their funding has significantly increased. How does this contribute to the government's journey towards reconciliation?
Well, thank you for your question. And as we know, it is part of our journey on towards reconciliation, and the Government of Canada is committed to make the necessary investments to settle claims and support the infrastructures and services that are vital to Indigenous communities, physical, mental, social, and economic health and well-being. The $39.6 billion in funding for the Department of Indigenous Services Canada includes, as you probably saw, the increase in funding for the out-of-court settlements, the increase in funding for infrastructure in Indigenous communities, and also improvements to access to safe, clean drinking water in First Nations communities. We know that is a major priority for our government and also Canadians to undertake these investments. And that will make, in fact, the showing that our ongoing journey to reconciliation.
Thank you. I realize this is multifaceted, but spending in the main estimates, so what spending in the main estimates will help with the continuing fight in COVID-19?
Well, that's a very important question. As you know, in the past 2 years, the Government of Canada has been committed to fight COVID-19 and our response to support Canadians' health, but also the workers, the businesses, and even non-profit organizations that have been helping to go through the response. And while projected spending is down significantly from last year, there is still a significant effort needed to keep Canadians safe and to also weather the broader impacts of the pandemic. So of the $397.6 billion in proposed spending in these estimates, approximately $9.7 billion is related to the COVID-19 pandemic response. And this is a decrease of $12.4 billion compared to last year's main estimates. And this funding would be used to procure vaccines, therapeutics, and other supplies, for border measures, as well as support for hard-hit businesses such in the tourism, arts, culture, and heritage sector. And also I want to add the overall reduction of $12.4 billion is largely due to the winding down of the benefit payments to individuals under the Canada Recovery Benefits Act. And of course, Canada's COVID measures will continue to be guided by science as it will evolve and as it will be needed.
the same thread, how are the protections for the federal public servants changing as COVID-19 is evolving?
Sorry, I missed.
Sure. How are the protections for the federal public servants changing as COVID-19 continues to evolve?
So I would say that we continue to focus on making sure public servants, their health and safety is our priority. And as we know, currently we have a vaccine mandate as is still it's still applied, and we are reviewing this vaccine mandate as we had said we would review after 6 months. Therefore, since April 6th, we're working on that review, and we should be coming out with the determination of how this policy will be moving forward in the near future.
Thank you. And just having probably time for one more quick question. Okay, so I'll throw it out there. And under the department's priorities, really interested to look at the focus on inclusivity within government and the work that's being done to ensure that we're not just diverse, but we do that action piece, which is the inclusivity.
Yes, and that we are committed to include a lot of our work on more inclusivity and protecting, of course, public servants in the same. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll now go to Mrs. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. In the past few years in budgets, I saw great stability in Vote 1 for Canada Post Corporation. It went from 22 million in 2019 to 22.21 million in 2021, and it's continued from one year to the next. I know that Canada Post is a Crown corporation that's independent and that has to make its own investments, so on and so forth. But it has to face UPS, Amazon, FedEx, and they are competitive when it comes to price, access, speed, infrastructure, and so on. So my question is this: how is it possible that we invest only $22.2 million for our Crown Corporation post office when we have contracts with Amazon Web Services, 15.7% and $12 million for Canada Border Services, and we invest less at home into our own Crown Corporation to modernize it, update it, rather than an American company? Well, first of all, thank you for your question. I'd be pleased to tell you that we invest in many measures to strengthen service at Canada Post. My colleague who's responsible for this can probably share the measures that strengthen it. So I'd ask Annie to go into detail, but I think it's important to say that work is being done by Canada Post that's very important, and we want to continue supporting it in the coming years. But when it comes to details, I'll let Annie answer. Thank you. As you indicated, it's a Crown corporation. It can raise its own revenue. When you made a comparison with Canada Border Services, that's 100% money allocated by Parliament. So you have to look at all the sources of revenue they have and their corporate plan. There might be more detail. Well, indeed, but our Crown Corporation, and it says so itself, it does invest, it makes efforts, gigantic efforts, but it needs an extra hand. We invest in an American giant, multi-billion-dollar corporation rather than helping a corporation here at home. My time is up, but that's a comment, if you will. It's constructive criticism. I'll be pleased to share that with my colleague so we can continue that.
Great question by Mrs. Vignola, and I'm certain we're going to get a great answer, but unfortunately there's time, so if you would like to provide that to the committee in writing, I'd appreciate that. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes.
Minister, the toxic drug supply crisis continues to result in the loss of thousands of lives in our country, and you're riding right across this nation. A trend that's only worsened since the onset of the pandemic. Since 2016, can you tell me if any emergency funding has been sought by any departments under Vote 5 to deal with this public health emergency?
So thank you. First of all, we all know we are all together in this, and we need to continue to invest, to fight, and make sure that people are supported. The fact that you're asking since 2016, I think, would be probably a response we would have to send in writing. I don't have the numbers especially, but I can tell you that there is an important effort, and just in the last budget of 2022, there are investments to help.
$100 million last budget over 3 years is $33 million a year over 10 provinces and 3 territories. That isn't even close to adequate to dealing with a health emergency at this magnitude. So I'm hoping that your leadership, you write the checks. You're the purse of the government here in terms of doling out the money. This isn't even close to adequate, and everybody in every province will tell you that's lost a loved one. I'm going to ask you about the Treasury Board, and does it have a workplace policy actually regarding substance use? And if so, when was it last updated? And would you support funding under Vote 10 for the creation of a review of such a policy as a strategic initiative to ensure that the government has as an employer, is following the most current evidence-based practices with respect to substance use?
Thank you for that very important question, and I know that we have many policies in place. I'm going to ask, I don't know if Marie-Chantal would like to specify if that idea of policy substance use is into what we have and if we are reviewing this shortly.
Thank you for the question. Indeed, when we look at it, we look at it in terms of health and safety as the employer in the workplace. And for example, when cannabis was introduced in Canada, we looked at it and to see how it would be managed. So it is part of that obligation that we have to provide a safe and healthy workplace for our employees. Now I can get back to you on if this particular item is under review in short term, but not that I'm aware of in the short term.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. And we'll now go to Mr. Lobb for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to all guests here. The first question I have is for Minister Fortier, and it's in regards to digital ID. Okay, I'm sure all members of Parliament are getting questions from their constituents asking about digital ID, and I just wanted to hear from you your opinion on digital ID and what it means to you and what it will mean to Canadians.
Well, thank you for that question. And also, I'm very humbled by the Prime Minister giving me the mandate to work on a digital strategy for government and also making sure that we work with different sectors, the provinces and territories, and to focus on digital ID. As you know, the government and private sector services become increasingly digital, and it's more critical than ever to be able to know that the partner at the other end of the transaction is genuine. And currently, for your information, 33 federal departments manage over 270 government online programs and services. And the Digital
Minister,
Identity Program.
Yes, I'm trying to be respectful here.
Yes.
I just want to know what it actually is going to mean for a Canadian. Is a digital ID something that they will have? Is it going to be like a passport? How will it be used? These are they're happy, everything's going great as far as you're concerned, but they want to know the details. So I'm just asking respectfully if I can get some details on what this is, how it's going to work, and when will it come into play?
I appreciate the fact that digital identity is a priority for our government to work also with provinces, territories, municipalities. I want to say to Paul Wagner, who is online, that might give you more precisions of where we're at this time.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Love. What I would offer is that working closely with the provinces, that's where the digital ID starts for Canadians. provinces, you'll note that British Columbia, Alberta, other provinces have started to roll out digital ID. The Government of Canada and industry will be able to leverage those digital IDs. It's very much a federated system. It needs to be based on standards, it needs to be based on a nationwide infrastructure, but that requires close collaboration with provinces where digital IDs are allocated to individuals and then leveraged by Government of Canada and industry.
Okay,
The other thing I'd like to add, if I may, where it'll be important that it's designed for also cybersecurity and privacy reasons, we have to make sure that we protect Canadians when and as we develop this digital ID. And also, if I can offer you a tech briefing to go more into the digital ID dimension and work we're doing, I would do that gladly with you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Wilk.
I appreciate the answer from Mr. Wagner and Minister Fortier. I will say, though, I can see how, if anybody's watching this, it has concerns about potential of digital ID. I don't know that we got a great answer other than the federal government is going to leverage what the provinces are already gleaning. And I think there's going to be some concerns about how that information is going to be shared. Like, is my personal health card information, my personal medical records, is that going to get shared? So, you know, I hope all members are maybe looking to do a study on this potentially to get some of these questions answered, and a briefing would be great. In addition to that, on another topic, it has to do with the digital transformation and cloud computing, okay? And I am interested if you can give us, because in 2018 there was a white paper, in 2020, but there really isn't much information since 2020. What percentage of government is actually hosted in the cloud today? I think in the US it's over 50%. What percentage is hosted on the cloud for Canadian government?
Before I ask Paul to maybe give the right data about what is in the cloud, I have to tell you that with the new Chief of Information Officer and I have been working on making sure that we bring forward a digital government that is good for Canadians and making sure we deliver better services to Canadians through digitization. But I will let Paul focus on the iCloud question.
Yeah, thank you for the question again. I would say between 5 and 10% of our services are currently in the cloud. We're actually evolving our cloud strategy. The strategy you spoke about cloud first. We're now evolving that into cloud smart and looking at where it is appropriate for us to move services into the cloud in a very safe and secure manner, as the minister mentioned, in terms of making sure privacy is of utmost importance, and that we ensure that it's a balance between improving service delivery for Canadians as well as reducing our overall technical debt.
Mr. Wagner, we'll now go to Mr. Johari for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and welcome to you, Minister, and the officials. I'm going to stay on the theme of digital government. Unfortunately, you didn't get a chance to expand on some of the work that our government is doing, and especially with the new mandate from the Prime Minister around the digital resources. Naturally, we all know that during the COVID, the gap that already existed also highlighted certain opportunities that we could capitalize on. Can you expand on what is it that TBS is working to ensure that advancement in digital services is supplemented with the focus on access across government services?
Well, thank you again for the question. And I have to say, this is really the focus on making sure we deliver better services to Canadians. And we did have, through COVID-19, the opportunity, I have to say, to go faster because we didn't have a choice. We needed to make sure that our digital government was digital opportunity was to support Canadians. And those efforts to deliver secure, that's one of the very important, is secure, seamless services and information are focused in 4 key areas. So the first one is modernizing the way we replace, build, and manage our IT systems, providing services to people when and where they need them. The third one is to take a coordinated approach to digital operations. And lastly, to tackle longstanding institutional barriers to change and innovate. And that is why we're continuing to put this efforts to build upon a strong policy framework and a set of digital principles characterized by accessibility, information and data, cybersecurity, and above all, user needs.
Can you briefly comment on the number of departments that they are moving in that direction and have implemented some of the digital resources needed to help Canadians access their information?
Well, I can say that a whole of government approach is brought forward. I don't know if Paul wanted to add some specific questions on where departments are at this time, but I can tell you that we are pushing for a whole government approach in digitalization of the services. I'll let maybe Paul add a couple of data points.
Minister, thank you for that. No, I think, and thank you for the question. I think if you look at Canada, we have a policy on service and digital, and we're one of the only countries that have actually integrated service and digital from a policy perspective. And so as organizations modernize their services, and even during the pandemic, we created a service officials council that brought together the service leads from departments to begin to have conversations, or in many cases, continue those conversations. They started without the council, to look at how we actually continue to integrate service delivery and digital. I was speaking recently with colleagues from the United States, and they were looking at our policy and how we've developed this, and they're looking at that as an implementation possibility within their framework as well.
Thank you. So it's great that we are aligned the policies and our services together. One of the indicators always a measure that adequately talks about the success of Canadians being able to access our services. So I see that there's a new indicator for this in the departmental result, namely the degree to which Canadians are successful in completing tasks on Government of Canada website. Can you speak to this, and how will it be measured, and how will it help us, inform us about some of the future digital efforts that we have to do?
Well, thank you again for a very thorough question on how we're delivering services to Canadians and making sure that the quality of those services are up to par. I will ask Karen to go into details. And also, before she does, I just want to mention to all members around the table that as much as our government is putting a lot of effort in making sure that we digitalize our services, we are working with provinces, territories, municipalities, the private sector to get the best practices, because we all have to work together. One difficult situation that we have all across Canada is we need more capacity of IT knowledge and human resources. And I know that by working together, we'll be able to tackle the fact that we need to go faster, but we have to do that in a quality and in a good manner. Maybe Karen can add how we're doing.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Alors,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
To have more surveys for Canadians and survey their satisfaction to accessing our website. I will also point out that the Canadian Digital Services is working very hard to ensure that our websites are fully accessible to our Canadians with respect to services we provide to them. So those are measures that we will put forward. And in our departmental plan, you are seeing that we have a target of 70%. And through surveying Canadians about how easy it is to access our services digitally, we will be able to provide measures in future plans.
Thank you very much. And we've now come to the end of our first hour of the meeting. And the Minister, I want to thank you for being here. I'm assuming that you still are staying with that schedule, because I know the questions were so jovial and your answers were so great that you might want to stay for the next hour, perhaps. But
I would love to, but unfortunately, I have another engagement. I do want to tell all members. Thank you for your thorough questions, and everybody did their homework, so thank you very much, and we'll get back to you with those questions in writing.
Thank you, Minister, and I want to thank you for your time for the hour, and you're always welcome back, and please do come when we get the chance to invite you. We don't have to suspend. We have one person that's joining us, but we don't have to suspend at this time, so we will continue on with the questioning with the officials as they are staying, and we have one new official that's here. And so we will now go to 5 minutes with Mr. Paul Hughes.
That's for me, too.
That's myself.
Sorry, Mr. McCauley? Okay, Mr. McCauley.
Minister, thanks. Goodbye. Quick question, couple quick questions. When are we going to have the updated mandate for federal public servants released? My understanding it was supposed to be a few weeks ago.
I believe you are referring to the vaccine mandates?
Yep.
So the vaccine mandates are currently under review. The policy on vaccination...
I realize that. The simple question is when will we have the updated...
it's currently... we are gathering the data, doing the analysis, and it should be coming shortly.
It's past the 6 months. When will we have the update, please? There's a lot of people
at the 6 months
deserve
point,
an answer.
Very shortly. At the 6 month point, the review started.
So you won't tell us when we'll have an update?
It's a governmental decision. So
a political decision,
the Treasury Board Secretariat is working
decision.
with Health Canada and providing the information to support the decision.
When will the 699 leave end?
Well, I'm happy to report that. Well, first of all, it will never end because it existed before the pandemic. 699 is one of the several provisions that are in collective agreements, and there are a number of leaves that are available. 699, it's when an employee is not in control to go into the workplace. So usually flooding, ice storm, and then pandemic.
Okay.
I am happy to report that we have now reduced by 99% the use of 699, so we're back to normal.
So pandemic-related 699 will not...
Marginal.
No? Or will not ever leave?
I'm sorry?
Will always be available?
It is part of the collective agreements.
Okay. I want to talk about Vote 10. Couple sessions back, historically, Vote 10 has always been 5 million, 6 million, very, very low number. A few years ago, under this government, it was inflated to several hundred million. I think it was 2 years ago, first minority government, we had a very frank discussion in this committee about it, that if the government tried to balloon it again, that this committee would reduce it back down to historical reasons, or to historical numbers. Now we see it's back up to 150 million. Why? And again, in relation to past historical numbers being much, much lower?
I can give you the details of the $152 million and transfer to my colleagues. So the biggest amount there is $107 million for COVID-19 vaccination policy implementation.
Why would that not be done through individual departments on a horizontal, as is done for other cross-departmental initiatives?
So this is done at the government level because it is more efficient, and we want also to have some controls into place. So if there is a department in need to get money for the COVID-19 vaccination policy,
5, if it's a contingency then.
We prefer to go through Vote 10 because this one, you need the approval of, obviously, the Treasury Board. You need to provide a Treasury Board submission.
Mm-hmm. But do you understand our concern, though, as members of Parliament? We went through this whole discussion with the Vote 40 and the Vote 10, or with the Vote 10 before, about pre-approving money in a roundabout way, taking away oversight from parliamentarians. It appears, again, we're back to this process of pushing in money when it should be perhaps done separately in departments. If you already have a plan specifically for 107, so you therefore know what departments that money is going into, why is it not in those department estimates and done as a horizontal, as has been done in the past? Okay. And what is the other $40 million for?
There is $24 million to respond to claims arising from the Phoenix system.
Okay.
There
Why
was-
is that in a vote 10 and not in individual departments again? Down as horizontal.
Mr. Chair, maybe I can take some of this question. So the money that we have under vote 10 is actually for horizontal disbursement. For example, the 24 million that my colleague, Mrs. Boudreau, spoke to with respect to damages represents money that once the department have paid out the claims, the damages from the claims, they will do a claim to TBS for reimbursement from vote 10.
This has not been done traditionally in the past. Again, up until 4 or 5 years ago, vote 10 was always 3 or 4 or 5 million traditionally. Why the change?
I would offer that we have more horizontal initiatives.
Why aren't all horizontal initiatives put in vote 10 then?
In those cases, the money that we will disburse from vote 10 is not known at the time when we go to the board. Therefore, we
But you
set
want
aside some
Parliament
money.
to pre-approve what you just said you don't know what the money is for. You just asked
No,
Parliament to pre-approve it.
We do know
You not
what the money
understand our
is
concern?
for, but the money, we do not know the amounts that would be required
You're
by the
asking us to
departments.
pre-approve it. You just said you don't know how much, but you're asking us to pre-approve it. And that's my concern with using the vote 10 when historically it has been done before. It should be in the departments as a horizontal. You just said you don't know how much, and I'm afraid I'm out of time. But you've said you don't know how much will be needed, but you're asking us to pre-approve totals.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. And once again, is another great question, and I'm sure that if you can provide us an answer to the committee and in writing, and we would, to the clerk, we will distribute that. We'll go now go to 5 minutes with Mr. Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about a question around barriers on innovation and economic growth. Since the minister last appeared in front of this committee, the government introduced Bill S6. The bill repeals or amends regulations that have over time become barriers to innovation and economic growth. Can any member of the team maybe comment on how that bill will do this?
Thank you for the question. So, as it was stated by the minister in the first hour, Bill S6 will offer more make it more easy for businesses to do business across border. It will provide a more digital environment for Canadians to deal with our Canadian business. And this bill will also ensure that we are able to make it less burdensome for businesses to do what they have to do. Therefore, this will help them with the restart of the economy post-pandemic.
Okay, and I'll go into a different area here. In its 2022-23 departmental plan, TBS notes that it will continue to implement the accessibility strategy for the public service of Canada, including by ensuring progress toward hiring 5,000 new public servants with disabilities by 2025. How many new public servants with disabilities have been hired since the launch of the strategy in 2019?
I can answer.
And again, to anybody who has the answer.
Thank you very much. I can answer that, Mr. Chair. Indeed, as a federal public service, we are very committed and taking concrete action to increase the number of persons with disabilities in the workplace, but also making it more accessible and supporting the fact that they remain in the public service. So the goal is 5,000 by 2025. In 2021, there was 1,363 new persons with disabilities that were hired across the public service. Having said that, I must report, though, that some at the same time have also left the public service. So the net new hires is 183 public servants. So it's clear that more work needs to be done, and we need to put some emphasis on maintaining in the public service those persons with disabilities that join our workforce. Thank you.
Okay, and is there anything being done to focus on raising more awareness of these roles that are available?
Absolutely, if I may. Absolutely, we are implementing the Accessible Canada Act and the strategy Nothing Without Us. This strategy has been developed with persons with disabilities themselves, and they developed a roadmap to increase their recruitment, but also their retention. So they're working on several initiatives, such as creating a welcoming and adapted place and workplace, and making sure that the accommodations provided do allow them to remain in the workplace. So there is the GC Accessibility Passport that has been put in place, which is a tool that streamlines the accommodation process and brings in new culture and allows people to move from one department to another and keep having that passport follow them instead of starting over every time they basically get a new job. But there are also other initiatives, such as the neurodiversity recruitment pilot in FinTrack that is being put in place with Shared Services Canada and the Public Service Commission. And there's a lending library service pilot with Shared Services Canada that works also on digital access. So lots is being done.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Baines. We will now go to Mrs. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's always a pleasure, perhaps not shared by everyone, but I like to look at the budget. I have so many questions. Maybe I have a problem, I don't know. I enjoy it. I will set aside the budget, although I love to decorticate it, and I will talk about one of the Treasury Board responsibilities, federal buildings. At some point, you have to get rid of a building, and there's a sale with an agent. I'll like to talk about one building in particular. Maybe you can't give me details, but nevertheless, I have questions about the process. It was probably done perfectly well. However, it was sold at 1/10 of its value. It's a heritage building. There was no consideration to force a future buyer to conserve that building. Is that normal for heritage buildings to be sold at 1/10 of their value without any consideration for the heritage value?
All to take that question.
Yeah, thank you for the question. In terms of the specific building, we wouldn't have the details because, as you said, it is not a building that Treasury Board itself owns. In terms of the disposal process, there's sort of 2 stages to this disposal process. So the first stage is there are legal requirements before you dispose of a property. So environmental requirements, Indigenous engagement, consultation requirements, And then the second part, you move into policy requirements with the disposal. So when you're looking at policy, the first thing that you look at is priority circulation. So can the building serve a public purpose? And there is a priority circulation to federal departments, provinces, municipalities. After that process, if there is not...
Merci.
Thank you. I'm studying the process. I'm a funny critter. I'm curious. But is it normal to decide to get rid of a building, but without including any measure to conserve this building, to allow it to be completely destroyed? Thank you.
Mrs. Magnola, unfortunately, 2.5 minutes goes by very quickly. But if you, Ms. Tattersall, if you can respond in writing, it'd greatly be appreciated. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. 98.5% of federal public servants have gotten vaccinated against COVID-19. I think that's an amazing accomplishment, and I strongly support vaccination and continue to urge people to come forward for all doses they are eligible for. With the majority of the public service now vaccinated and the small portion of public servants who remain unvaccinated, they're eager to return to work from unpaid leave. They're looking for clarity on when the review of the public service vaccine mandates will be complete. Can you please advise us of the status of the review to date, when you think that will be complete? I'm even getting constituents about travel. Obviously, it's really important. This woman, Kirsten, can't even get home to the UK to see her family, and man, David just wants to get on a trip and get back on the road and see friends and family. So maybe you can give us some idea when this is going to be complete.
Thank you for the question. All mandates are being examined. So in the examples that you just gave, you gave examples for travelers, for employees. So those are under separate vaccination mandates. As for the work that Treasury Board Secretariat is currently doing is with Health Canada, providing all of the data, looking at the epidemiology, most recent epidemiologic information, and looking at various considerations, such as we're also consulting, speaking with bargaining agents, seeking views, and we're bringing that to the government, who is taking the decision.
I appreciate
in
it. I just know in my own
So-
province, like, people are back to work in the public service. So at the time, it's running long here. People need answers. They need an explanation. In terms of outsourcing, it's becoming a huge concern under the government, with millions being spent on expensive consultants. You heard me talk about this, like McKinsey and Company, which paid out a substantial settlement for advice it gave that played a huge role in the tragic overdose and opioid crisis. Does the strategic review include looking at outsourcing and why this work isn't being done by federal public servants?
So for the strategic review, my colleague, Mme. Boudreau, can answer. Perhaps Mme. Tattersall can also speak about outsourcing. So I'll let you determine who goes first.
I can start with the strategic review. So strategic review was announced in budget 2022. We are at the planning stage of it. You have seen in the document, they're talking about real property, they're talking about travel being more efficient. And as indicated, we're going to provide an update in budget 2023.
Thank you very much. And unfortunately, Ms. Tattersall, you again draw the card right when the time is up. So if you do have anything to add to that, please provide that in writing. It's greatly appreciated. We'll now go to Mr. Paul Hoos for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to get back to my question to the minister about that $15 billion at national defense. The minister did answer, but I have the parliamentary budget officer who knows the budget cycle better than I do, and he says there's a problem here. Could this be just an error? Error with calculations, typo, whatever? Because it's inexplicable for the PBO, so imagine for us. Well, to continue on the President's answer, she mentioned that there was a $23 billion gap In 2022, there was $8 billion more set aside for defense, so you would end up with $15 billion. That $15 billion is what you'll find in the federal budget compared to the main estimates and the DND departmental plan. That's because that $15 billion has not yet been approved by Treasury Board. Once those amounts are approved by Treasury Board, they'll be part of the supplementary estimates A, B, and C. That's why we have a gap. The gap is because approval hasn't yet been given by Treasury Board. So there's no approval. We cannot show you this. Okay, so if that's the case, why is someone like the PBO wondering about this? He must know the procedures. I can't speak on behalf of the PBO.
Thank you.
Okay. When it comes to staff, earlier you talked about people coming back, vaccinated, unvaccinated, but when it comes to staff right now, I think last time we saw each other was before Christmas. Where are we at with return in person? Every departmental manager does what he or she wants to do. You have a good memory, yes. The situation is evolving. When we talked last time, we said, let's be careful. When we had the message, I co-signed it with my colleague, that the Department of Health, gradual return to work, and history showed we were right. We had another wave, so caution was necessary so that we don't end up coming in, going back, coming in, going back. Now, we're in a period where orientations have been updated. All departments have a toolbox with directives and policies that we continue to update, but we're in a situation where we have a lot of experimentation. We're not the only ones in this situation. There are various models. We're taking advantage of these months before the summer to experiment and see, given the mandates of the departments and the operations of the departments, what kinds of organizations lend themselves to different methods of work, what are the best practices, and then give the go-ahead. Well, because notwithstanding the clear problem of COVID and the danger, work efficiency or effectiveness in the past 2 years, there were a lot of problems at immigration, for example, the passport. Is this a direct impact of telework? Were there documents that were left by the wayside? Is it harder to... I wouldn't put the responsibility on that because other than the pandemic, we know that there were extraordinary events. I think you will agree with that. That presents a great challenge for the public service. It had been a long time that we hadn't seen that, but productivity is a key element in evaluating our different approaches, and that's one of the major principles. How do we serve Canadians properly? Are we in a position to fulfill our mandate? Health and safety remains a consideration, but productivity too, I can assure you. I guess I have a minute left, 30 seconds. Before the holidays, we had problems with cybersecurity. Now, with this conflict, we see, have there been even more attacks by Russia? I'll ask my colleague, Mr. Wagner, to talk to you about cybersecurity. Yes, we continue to be vigilant. We continue to make sure that we have increased security for our systems. We work the Canadian Security Establishment and other organizations. All managers are in hypervigilance mode. You've seen the figures, as I did. We continue to make sure that the Canadian government infrastructure remains secure and intact.
To Mr. Kazmierczuk for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my colleague from Courtney Alberni raised some really great questions about the strategic policy review, and so I wanted to pick up the thread of that conversation. Now, as I understand it, the review has two different streams, and just wondering if you can talk about the two different streams, what the focus is of both, and then maybe just give us an example of under both streams of some of the things that we're going to be assessing and looking at.
Thank you. Effectively, we have two streams under Budget 2022. The first stream was, in fact, included in Minister Fortier's mandate letter, and it was about comprehensive review of policy programs of the government. So first stream will be looking at big programs and looking at their impact in terms of net zero reduction, in terms of quality of life, and things like that. It will be continuous programs review. It's not only one time we're going to do it, we want to do it year after year. So that's stream number one, included under Budget 2022. Stream number two is about being smarter, is about being more efficient, more effective, and this is where we see looking at real property, looking at travel, how we do business. So that will be stream number two. And stream number two, there is a commitment to come back in Budget 2023 with more information.
So the first stream as well is looking at also how these programs, reviewing the programs to see how it aligns with the government's priorities, whether it's meeting those objectives and those targets.
That is correct, and we will use framework in order to be able to assess that. As I was mentioning, quality of life framework that we know, it's also part of all ministers' mandate letter. We'll use that framework to assess programs and making sure that we are delivering on priorities for Canadians.
Now, how is the strategic policy review different from, departments do reviews all the time, individually as individual departments, ministries, and whatnot. How does this strategic policy differ from what usually takes place at the different department levels? Just curious.
So we want to take horizontal view. I'll give you maybe an example. If we look at a program, a student program, we know we can have a student program under ESDC, under Indigenous Services Canada, and other programs. So we're going to look at a line of business, basically, horizontal review, and we'll be able to provide feedback on governance, on programs, on areas to improve, and things like that.
That's actually a really good point, because when you look at, for example, youth programs that are out there to support young people, you're talking about 10 different ministries that have responsibility for supporting our young people. So Treasury Board, so this strategic policy review is going to sort of tie those different ministries together. Okay, that's terrific to hear. Is there an expected amount of funding that's expected to be saved because of this policy review? And is that number driving this review process, or is that just sort of an estimation that's separate from what the real goal is?
So under stream one, as indicated in Budget 2022, it's really to look at the programs to make sure that we are efficient. There is no money attached, as we have read and we have seen in Budget 2022.
So there is no financial goal that's attached?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that you're aware of. Okay, terrific. You touched upon very briefly upon remote work or virtual work and how that might fit into a strategic policy review to see how we can find efficiencies and make government more effective. Can you maybe talk about how remote work or hybrid model fits into a strategic policy review, knowing that again the review is just beginning, but how could that conversation fit into a strategic policy review?
As an example, we'll look at the real estate. We'll look at the footprint, because obviously what we have seen since COVID-19 is, like you said, hybrid of people working from home. So it's time to look at the real estate that we lease, the real estate that we own, and look at what is the best that we need in order to capture the new world that we are in. So that will be part of the review that we are undertaking.
Especially considering we're coming out of a pandemic where a lot of trends that we maybe saw emerging were accelerated and accentuated during the COVID pandemic. So I think the timing of the strategic policy review is actually quite excellent. So.
Thank you. And now we will go to, in our fourth round, and we'll start with Mr. Lobb for 5 minutes.
Thanks again, Mr. Chair. And again, appreciate everybody coming here. I'd like to go back to Mr. Wagner again for his input on digital ID. And I'm pretty sure the province of Ontario is spending like $20 billion on digital ID. And you look at some of the stuff, and I'm not going to be critical of them either, but you read some of the stuff and it says there's a check mark, so that when you go to the liquor store, you just show them a check mark. Now, I know I'm simplifying that quite a bit, but I know we're not spending $20 billion for a check mark, but how do you see the federal government working with the provinces and territories on digital ID? Is this something that you envision your passport is linked to your driver's license and this kind of thing? Like, can you give us a 101 here on what you see?
A couple of different examples, and thank you for the question, Mr. Webb. I think, one is around a digital ID for government services. And so, if you think about having a digital ID, and we'll talk about what that looks like from a citizen perspective, but, the citizen owns that digital ID. They own that code. And it's not, there's no master database where all the digital IDs are stored and becomes a target. What happens when you go and use your digital ID is you actually validate that the ID that you have is in fact you, and there's another layer of protection in there called multi-factor authentication. It basically is another factor to ensure that, if I just pick up somebody's cell phone or I get access to somebody's digital ID, I also need to have another factor to ensure that assurance. So I want to just go back a little bit on that first question you had around, the idea that are we exchanging, lots of information between the provinces? The goal is to actually have a very minimalistic approach in terms of how that works. From a citizen perspective, one of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a consultation with Canadian citizens around how a pan-Canadian infrastructure could work, how digital ID is seen as being beneficial to citizens, to businesses. And so, as individual provinces start to build out their digital ID infrastructures, and like you said, you can envisage a world where a citizen has a digital ID, they go in to get a driver's or a license for their car. Can you show me your driver's license? Well, that can be pulled up in a digital wallet. You could have a credential that's your driver's license. You could also have a credential that's your proof of vaccination. And that, that will be attached to your digital ID, because if you think of one of the gaps today in a lot of provinces, you showed your vaccine credential probably on your phone, and then you had to produce a physical piece of identification to confirm that it was in fact Paul Wagner. Digital ID actually brings those two things together, binds them, and creates that seamless transaction.
Right, but it's got to be a little bit more than that, because that's seems pretty analog to me that, we're just linking your license to your vaccine passport. I know you're just giving me a 101 there, but if you log in to check your tax status or you file your HST, I don't see any glaring problem with that right now that we would need another factor of authentication or identification. Like if you log in through your bank card, your banking, that sign in seems fairly safe and fairly secure. So are we scrapping that and building on something else? I'm just trying to get it so I can explain it back to my constituents what this actually is, and I'm still not getting it, I guess.
So I think we're planning a technical briefing, and happy to go into a little bit more details where we can show this a little bit more effectively. But the short of it is, and we're not displacing the other forms of identification that are out there. And if the examples you gave where you're logging into individual systems, if you think about the ability to have a digital ID, though, I'll go back to the Government of Canada. If you have a service platform where you log in as Ben Lobb, and you're able to then access a multitude of government services having been identified, those are the kind of benefits that we can see downstream. We're not architected for that now, but it does allow for that.
Yeah, I can already do that. So are you proposing that my passport would be digital ID as well? Or will I have a digital passport in this plan?
So there will always be physical opportunities for this. There's no Canadian left behind. Is digital passport something that is, I won't say this part of the initial plan. We need to get an infrastructure in place to start to use that. I wouldn't say digital passport would be the first place we would start for that.
Okay, but it would seem reasonable that would be something you're proposing. I'm glad to hear nobody will be left behind because many of us represent seniors and Amish and Mennonites.
Absolutely.
So, okay, well, we'll say to be determined, to be continued.
Happy to continue the conversation.
So we'll now go to Mr. Housefather for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again to the officials for all being here today. I'm just going to go back to Mr. Wagner for 1 second on the digital ID project. Could you tell me how many different accounts does the Government of Canada manage today?
Well, 33 departments and 270 different services. So I don't have the exact number of accounts, but
would it be in the couple hundreds, like more than 200?
In terms of accounts?
Yeah, in terms of accounts.
There's 270 different services that you can log into electronically.
Okay, so like 270 at least.
Correct.
And how could we do better in terms of managing that?
Okay, you're going from in terms of login. So, back to Mr. Lobb's question, I think if you think of digital ID as being a bit of a cornerstone for service delivery, right now, we could have a situation where you have to log into Parks Canada to get your campsite, and then you have to log into ESDC in a separate platform to apply for CPP. If you leverage digital ID and have the ability to actually identify individuals, get them into a platform where you can start to then present a multitude of government services, that's where we want to go from a digital government perspective. We're all doing it in our daily lives and other platforms, but it does begin with that verified identity so that we know we're dealing with the individual on the other end of the device.
It entirely simplifies the process for those of us who are technologically literate, but as I guess Mr. Lobb said, of course, it doesn't resolve the problem for those who don't have access to technology or those who don't know how to use it at all. I mean, in the end result, that would be what it would be. It would be making life a lot easier for those of us who are technologically adept.
So I think that's absolutely one path of it. The other path of that would be as we start to look at service modernization and thinking about how we actually can align services to deliver in a digital world, that will yield gains in terms of an analog world as well as we start to morph services together.
Thank you. And I just want to go back to the real property question because I know homework was given, Mr. Chair, for somebody to respond in writing to various questions. I'd like to give her the opportunity to respond now quickly, orally, so she doesn't have to spend hours writing out the answer.
Thank you for the opportunity. So the answer is, it depends. So in our policy, we set out that when you're disposing, that you look at conserving the heritage value of the properties. And there are procedures that you follow that are set out by, I believe it's Heritage Canada. So there are mandatory procedures for heritage assessment and conservation that departments need to follow when they dispose of properties. Thank you.
So essentially what you're saying is that under this policy, experts will make a determination if the heritage character of the property is important enough to require the preservation of in the event of a contractual disposal.
You've done a good summary.
Sorry?
You've done a good summary.
Okay,
you could
good.
You could do my job, I think. But yes, essentially when you're disposing, you need to undertake a sort of an assessment. You work with Parks Canada, and then as you dispose, you take those factors into consideration.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Do I have any time or am I done?
Still have a minute and a half.
A minute and a half. Okay, so I'm going to continue on that path. So as I understand it, again, there's a policy in place which says we're consulting with other Canadian government agencies, we're consulting with departments, we're consulting with the provincial government in all provincial instances, we're consulting with municipalities and Indigenous communities. And all of these different organizations will get to see if there is a community or public use that can be made of the property before the government would then seek to look to potentially dispose of it to a private buyer. Would I be correct in that?
Yes, correct. So as I was saying before, There are first legal requirements that you have to follow. So there's a legal duty to consult with Indigenous people. And then the second step, when you start the policy process, is what we call priority circulation. So we circulate those to federal departments, municipalities, to municipalities who inform official language minority communities about whether there's a public purpose use for it. And so if there is, then you would proceed with that disposal. If not, only after you've gone through that step, would you then move to a position where you would be selling it on the market.
That makes total sense. And I assume, again, that we look at when we do put something on the market in terms of offers, what the price is, if that makes business sense, and we have standard model contracts that have a variety of different clauses that could be used depending on the type of disposal we're doing, correct?
So there would be an appraisal process. You would have a sense of the fair market value before you go to tender.
Perfect.
Thank
I think
you.
that's it.
And
Thank
in
you,
that
Mr.
case,
Chair.
in that case, I allowed Ms. Tattersall a chance to answer instead of having to send us in a written answer. As you can see, the bells are ringing. They are 30-minute bells, and we basically have a 2-minute walk, and we have 15 minutes left of questioning. But I would ask that we have unanimous consent to finish this as we finish and then adjourn at that point in time. Do I have unanimous consent? I see that we do. Thank you very much. We will now go to Mrs. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you very much. I'd like to get back to the budget. Vote 30, Treasury Board. Needs for payroll for 2021-22 for the main estimates, that was $600 million. It was increased to $800 million. So there's $200 million difference. What explains that difference? And this year, $600 million was anticipated. Should we expect another increase during supplementary estimates? Yes, thank you for your question. Last year, there was this increase of $200 million. It's really the needs of the departments. There are people who take parental leave. It's very difficult to know at the beginning of the year how much this will cost the government, or how many people will take parental leave. So we do regular follow-up with the departments to make sure we have enough money, because Treasury Board pays this out to each of the departments. Once the repayment is done, all the information is available department by department on our website. Is that only parental leave, or is this one example among many? It's an example among others. Okay. Under Vote 25, you have $2.1 billion for operating budget that was postponed. Same for Vote 35. What does that mean? And is it postponed because it wasn't used? Why wasn't it used? Well, let me explain the mechanics here. Every year, the departments receive their budget. At the end of the year, there might be delays when it comes to the expenses they have to pay. Every department has an opportunity to postpone this for the next year, up to 5%, and 20% of their capital budget. When they do that postponement, the money is taken from the Treasury Board credits, and that is postponed to further years. So it's like planning of what will be postponed. Okay.
I'll go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here today and for your hard work. Now, your own report, it states that people with disabilities, hiring people with disabilities, is worse than any equity-seeking group in the federal public service. And with the federal accessibility legislation now in place and employment for persons with disabilities identified as the key priority, recognizing the explicit interface between disability, poverty, and employment, what are the federal government's key strategies in accommodating employees who acquire a mental or physical health impairment and are unable to carry out their current duties? And I think about the strategies accommodating those with long COVID, for example, as well, estimated to be 10 to 25% of individuals who acquired COVID are unable to carry out their current duties. And I'd like to hear what your plan is.
Thank you for the question. So with long COVID, we're looking at a condition that is relatively new, but requiring, of course, medical certification. And employees have a sick leave bank that they can use, but once the diagnostic of long COVID is established, those employees are eligible to long-term disability insurance. It's part of their benefits package, so which is a bit different from the accessibility and persons with
and
disability
I'm also thinking about
issue.
disability management. Like,
Correct.
what are you going to do to ensure that your managers are trained in disability management so that you're accommodating people? Because if you're not back to work within 12 months, the chances are 99% you're never going to return to work. So this needs to be a top priority of the public service.
Thank you. I forgot to turn it on. Absolutely, you're right. The longer an employee is out of the public service or the workplace writ large, the more difficult it is for. So here we are working with several departments, but also doing more along the lines with the insurer of case management and training managers to maintain contact and a positive one with employees while on disability to ensure that when we work with the medical practitioner, when they return, we have a good understanding of what is needed to provide a successful return to work.
But the track record is not good, because I outlined the failure. It's in your own report.
Agreed, we can do better.
Okay.
I'll go to Mr. McCauley for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, discussions around the table. I just want to put through a matter of hand motion that we call the PBO to appear for 1 hour on the estimates sometime before the end of May. If the schedule works out, and we leave it up to the clerk to squeeze in 1 hour.
Okay. And I'm just a matter of hand and motion. So I'm seeing around the room, it looks like there's consensus that this is approved.
Just looking at the schedule that came out today, I was like, oh, there's no PBO. So.
Okay. Thank you. We'll take that under advisement and try to schedule an hour for the PBO. Mr. McCauley, you still have 4.5 minutes.
Thanks. I just want to go to our issues with access to information, realizing, of course, that COVID negatively affected ability to do it. When do we see getting back? I realize there's a review going on. When will we see getting back? I hate to use the word to normal, but getting back to like a proper ATIP process where we're actually recognizing and respecting the legislation of 30 days.
We'll turn to Paul Wagner for that question.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Looking over the past 5 years, we've seen at least a doubling in terms of the overall number of access to information requests, and then couple that with, as you mentioned, the time during COVID. I think the work that we're doing under the access to information review, will yield. I think the minister will be tabling that report in Parliament by the end of this calendar year. Well, we've already started to work on activities to help departments to get to those targets.
Let me just ask you something quickly, and I appreciate what you're saying, but this actually does precede COVID. I still have ATIPs from the 42nd Parliament that are still outstanding, going on 5.5 years. In your departmental plan, like there is legislation. It's not a suggestion. It's not, well, maybe do it if you can, but it's legislation, 30 days response to ATIPs. But your own departmental plan is to have only achieve 90% of 90%. So basically 81% of ATIPs will be handled properly under the required legislation. Do you think that's acceptable to actually put in writing that your goal is to violate the legislation 19% of the time? Like, should we not go for 100% and recognize? Like, I think it was 49% last year achieved. Should we not be like, this is legislation, recognizing it and saying, yes, we will follow the law?
No, and I think you're absolutely correct. The targets and the way that departments, our department included, set those targets and meet those targets. That's germane to the review that's underway. We're looking at putting in place a system, a software system to work, help departments to allow them to actually expedite the ATIP request processing within their departments, so that not each department has to go out and do that on their own. We're working on
coming in. That's a great idea. When will it be coming in?
The RFP is in its final stages, so we can expect contracted award within the coming months. So that will be there and available for departments to be able to avail themselves. We're working with, we've talked a lot about recruitment. We're working with departments on recruitment of ATIP professionals. This is, it's a domain that has absolutely very specific requirements around the kind of work that needs to be done. So we're, again, helping departments so they don't have to each do it in a bespoke manner.
We're at nearing post-pandemic stage. I realize it's still going on, but are the ATIP people being allowed back in the buildings to do their work? We had an OPQ come back. I think it was, we lost 17,000 days to on 699 claimed because of COVID. Is this still ongoing? Are they being allowed back in the buildings to do their work? Because not everything can be digital. There are papers, notes, et cetera, that have to be found.
So absolutely a great question, and I think Marie-Chantal spoke to the variety of return to work activities. Departments are looking at what the critical services are within each of the departments and making sure that those are staffed up accordingly. And as you mentioned, a lot of this work does require paper, and some of it does require work on classified systems, which again requires work on site.
But when will they all be back or allowed back on site to do that required work? And again, this is not to, as the information commissioner, like she's very, I think I'm abrupt in this committee. Her comments are far worse than mine. Her comments are far worse than mine, far more critical than mine about the government's performance on ATIP.
If I may,
Like
Honorable.
when will we see them allowed back in to do the work?
If I may, Honorable Member, they are allowed, employees are allowed, but of course, health and safety first. If they were part of a tracing, if there is COVID, no, but they are allowed to do the work based on what the Deputy Minister, his organization and direction is.
If they're allowed
Thank you
in,
very
then
much.
why the delay,
Thank you.
continuing delays?
Thank you. And we need to, we have a vote that we've got to get to, and so we're going to go to Mrs. Thompson for the last 5 minutes.
And I'm going to reference the 2022-2023 departmental plan. So TBS notes that in collaboration with Indigenous Services Canada and Public Services and Procurement Canada, it will issue mandatory requirements and guidance to support departments in meeting the phased implementation of government-wide minimum targets of 5% of the value of federal contracts awarded to Indigenous businesses. When do you expect that target to be mandatory?
We'll turn to Madame Tattersall.
Thank you for the question. So as the government announced in August of the past year, that we'll be phasing in the target over 3 years. I am pleased to say that up on our website is a mandatory procedure now for all departments on how they can meet that 5% target. That is a floor, not a ceiling. And that mandatory procedure that Treasury Board has now launched is effective April 1st of this year.
Thank you. And sort of following on with this, what will the consequences on departments, what will be the consequences on departments that do not meet the minimum target of 5% of the value of the federal contracts?
So what we have set up is an accountability through reporting. So there are 2 ways in which we're doing that, and we've been working with departments, but also with Indigenous partners as well in setting up that accountability. So first is we've updated our requirements around proactive disclosure, so it will be much easier to see when you go there which contracts are being awarded to Indigenous businesses. And the second thing that we are looking at is every department will have to report on how they're achieving their target on an annual basis. And we are actively looking at updating the departmental planning process so that can be transparent to the public, our Indigenous partners, and to parliamentarians.
Thank you. Will this apply to Crown corporations?
So right now, because it is a Treasury Board policy, our policies apply to organizations in Schedule 1, 1.1 and 2 of the FAA. So what we are looking at, so crown corporations don't form part of that, but what we are looking at is where they don't, how do they follow the spirit and intent of what we want to achieve through this policy? So that's how we're approaching it at this time.
Thank you. And I know the bells. I'm not going to go on to the final question. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And yes, we still have about 15 minutes, I think, on the bells, but I do appreciate the committee and your questions. And I want to on behalf of the committee, I want to thank the witnesses. It's so nice, as we saw, you were the first that came back to us in January, and want to thank you for being here again today, as well as those of you that are with us virtually. And thank you very much for everything you did. And Ms. Tattersall, I'm sorry you always ended up getting the question when the time was running out. But I want to thank everybody for that. With that said, I would like to thank the interpreters and the technicians for all the work that you've been doing for us, and as well as our analysts and our clerk. And with that said, and so you don't have to run to the House, I declare the meeting adjourned.